My daughter-in-law said I was too old to drive, so I gave my car to someone who truly deserved it. She thought she was humiliating me. She didn't know I'd been preparing my lesson for 25 years. That Tuesday morning, Brooke marched into my house without even knocking. Her perfume arrived before she did, sharp, expensive, and cold. "I've decided I'm selling your car," she said, tossing her blonde hair like she was doing me a favor. "You don't need it anymore. It's unsafe for someone your age." I smiled, though my hands trembled slightly around my teacup. "Is that so?" She gave a tight grin. "Aaron agrees. We'll handle the sale tomorrow." When she left, I looked out the window at my silver Sonata, sunlight dancing on its hood. She thought she'd taken control, but she had no idea. The next day, the driveway was empty, though not for the reason she expected. Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. If you're watching, tell us your city in the comments. We always read them. My name is Ellen Pierce, 67, retired first-grade teacher with a permanent glitter stain on my soul and a drawer full of smiley face stickers I cannot bring myself to throw away. 40 years at Willow Creek Elementary taught me to spot a lie by the way eyes flinch and a kindness by the way hands pause. Children don't hide who they are. Adults learn to. I met Aaron's father in a snowstorm outside Dayton. He wrapped my scarf twice around my neck and said, "Marry me when the roads thaw." The roads did. We did. 10 years later, an ice patch on Route 4 took him in a breath, and I learned what silence sounds like when it sits in a living room chair and refuses to leave. Aaron was 7, elbowy and brave. I promised him 2 things that night. We would never lie to one another, and I would get him to college even if I had to sell my wedding china and my good Sunday shoes. We didn't have much. We had peanut butter dinners and a chalkboard nailed to the kitchen wall where I wrote spelling words and savings goals in colored chalk. On Saturdays, I graded papers at the laundromat while Aaron built forts from warm towels and read to me through a mouthful of raisins. The first time he brought home straight A's, I taped the report card beside the thermostat like a trophy and whispered, "You will have a better life than I did." I meant a life without scraping, without making the kind of choices that bruise you from the inside. I kept that promise. He became an accountant, steady as a metronome, gentle with numbers, and, for a long time, with me. He'd stop by after work to fix my leaky faucets and eat meatloaf, leaving his dress shoes by the door like a boy again. When he got his first real job, he drove me to Willow Creek at dawn so I could ring the handbell I used on the first day of every year. We laughed the whole way. He called me Coach. Then came Brooke, tall, glossy, efficient, like an advertisement that learned to talk. She met me with a bouquet and a compliment. "Such youthful energy, Ellen." Her perfume made me feel like I had stepped into a department store I couldn't afford. In photographs, she angled her chin upward the way women do when they are practicing for a crown. Within months, they married in a venue with chandeliers the size of my old Buick, and I clapped until my palms ached, because that's what mothers do. We bless what we fear might hurt us. Little things shifted first. Calls got shorter. Dinners became texts. My wedding china, which I had promised to sell if needed, began to look like a poor relation compared to their registry crystal. At Thanksgiving, Brooke volunteered to host to take the pressure off. She placed me at the end of the table near the kitchen door, good for refilling the gravy, and later sent me home with leftovers labeled soft foods. I laughed in the car and cried in the driveway. Loans arrived dressed as emergencies. $500 for a dental bill, $1,200 for a transmission, $2,000 for a bridge while Brooke waited on a bonus. It added up to $7,300 and a knot between my shoulder blades I could not rub out each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time Aaron said, "I'll make it right, Mom." He believed it when he said it. That's the trouble with kind men who are afraid of storms. They mistake thunder for inevitability. There's a photograph on my mantle, me in a denim jumper, kneeling beside a boy with a missing front tooth. We're planting tulip bulbs in the shallow bed along the porch. I remember that day because the ground was stubborn and the shovel wobbled, and Aaron said, "What if nothing grows?" And I told him, "We plant anyway." That's what faith is. I have planted my whole life. Lessons, forgiveness, casseroles on front steps. Some seeds never sprout. Some bloom when you're not looking. Brooke looked at my life like a realtor at a walkthrough, assessing square footage, counting exits. "This house is too big for one person," she said the first spring after the wedding, running her hand along my banister like it already belonged to her. "Stairs are dangerous at your age." I joked that the day I couldn't carry a laundry basket was the day she could wheel me outside with it. She did not laugh. When they visited, she arranged my mail into tidy piles labeled "to pay" and "to toss." "Older people forget things," she said brightly, as if reading from a brochure. "Let us help with your bills." She said older the way some people say moldy. Aaron stared at his lap. I set the kettle on the stove and let it scream a little longer than necessary. Still, I tried to love her. That is the embarrassing part, the earnestness of it. I invited her to the Cedar Ridge Book Club and made carrot cake from scratch. She said she was gluten cautious and brought a lemon-scented candle instead. She gave me makeup tutorials in my own bathroom and suggested I lean into neutrals. I stood under the vanity bulb and nodded like a student who has already failed the quiz. On Sundays, I walked to church past the high school baseball field. Parents in folding chairs, teenage boys slinging light into the air with every pitch. I sat in the last pew and prayed for the specific kind of wisdom that keeps a woman from mistaking quiet for peace. The world kept being the world. I kept being Ellen one Sunday. After pot roast and polite conversation, Brooke opened her laptop at my table. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet so tidy it made me itch. "Here's our plan," she said, as if I had hired her. "Sell your car for 4.5, contribute 60% of your pension while we transition to a bigger place. For potential grandchildren," she added, glancing at Aaron like a cue card. "And finally, sign a power of attorney, just in case something happens." She slid the pen across the table with a manicure that could cut glass. I looked at my hands, brown spots like constellations, a gold ring I still wear though the man is gone, and felt a strange calm settle over me. It wasn't resignation. It was the quiet that comes before a bell rings, before children race in from the hallway and you remember you know exactly what to do. Because long before Brooke, there was Mr. Whitaker, my next-door widower with the gentlest laugh in Cedar Ridge. He taught music at the high school and mowed my lawn the summer after the accident when I forgot how we played gin rummy on my porch when the nights were too hot for sleep. He used to say, "Dignity is like a hat, Ellen. People will try to knock it off, you just put it back on and keep walking." When he passed, he left me a letter with a key and a sentence I did not understand then. "Use this only when someone tries to take your dignity." All of that, snow and tulips, pot roast and spreadsheets, a key in an envelope, lives under my skin like a map. So when Brooke said, "It's unsafe for someone your age to drive," I heard what she didn't say. "Hand me the keys to more than your car." I smiled and poured more tea. The lesson I had been preparing for 25 years was almost ready to be taught. I used to think betrayal happened all at once, like a slap, sharp and clear. But I learned it's slower than that. It seeps. It starts with just helping and ends with your name missing from your own bills. After that Sunday lunch, I stopped sleeping well. I'd wake at 3 a.m., hearing the echo of Brooke's voice in the kitchen, her tone flat and professional, like she was presenting a quarterly report. "Sell your car, sign this, we'll manage things." I'd sit at the table in the dark, the old clock ticking like a metronome for my thoughts. I replayed every word, every look Aaron didn't give me. He'd always been the boy who defended me in playground arguments, who built me birdhouses for Mother's Day. But now, he was a man married to ambition in a silk blouse. The next morning, I found a text from him. Mom, Brooke just wants what's best. Let's not make this a big deal. No love you, no question of how I felt, just management. The kind reserved for bills and errands. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe they did mean well. Maybe they were just clumsy. But then small things began to vanish from my house, not valuables, but personal things. My driver's license, my checkbook, the spare key to the car. When I asked Brooke about the missing items, she tilted her head, faux sympathy dripping from every word. You probably misplaced them, Ellen. It happens. The "it happens" struck me harder than an insult. It was the tone nurses use in care homes when someone spills juice on the floor. That week, she started helping me with groceries, showing up unannounced carrying plastic bags, rearranging my pantry like she was organizing a stranger's kitchen. This way, you won't forget what you have, she said. I don't forget, I replied quietly. Her smile didn't falter. Of course not. I told Aaron later that night that I didn't like her tone. He sighed. She just worries about you, Mom. You do forget things sometimes. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, You sound like her. He hung up early. Every kindness she offered came with a string, and I began to feel them wrapping tighter each week. Brooke called my pension office just to verify details. She spoke to my insurance company to help lower costs. She asked for my bank's routing number for automatic bill pay. One afternoon, I caught her rifling through the drawer where I keep my papers. When I asked what she was doing, she said, Just organizing. Without me? Her lips pressed into a thin smile. You get flustered by paperwork, I'm saving you time. I realized then she wasn't trying to save me time. She was trying to erase me from it. The following Sunday, she arrived with Aaron and a folder. Inside were printed spreadsheets and 2 forms clipped together. One was for the sale of my car, the other, the power of attorney. Just sign, Ellen, she said sweetly. This will make things smoother. We'll handle your finances responsibly. I looked at my son. He couldn't meet my eyes. It's for the best, he muttered. For the best, I repeated. For whom? Brooke's smile hardened. For everyone, you're alone here. What if something happens? Who will handle things? Me, I said. I've been handling things my whole life. Her laugh was small and cruel. You're not 40 anymore. That was the moment something inside me went still. Not broken, still. Like the second before a storm hits and the air feels wrong. I excused myself, walked into the hallway, and looked at the framed photo of Aaron at 10 years old. Freckles, messy hair, holding up his science fair ribbon. I whispered to that boy, Where did you go? They left soon after. I watched from the window as Brooke tugged Aaron toward the car, her hand gripping his wrist too tightly. He looked back once, then turned away. That night, I opened my old lockbox from under the bed, the one with Mr. Whitaker's key inside. He had written Pine Hollow on the tag in fading ink. I hadn't been there in years. But his words came back to me clearly, as if he were sitting in the room. Use it only when someone tries to take your dignity. So I packed a small bag. Documents, spare clothes, my teaching pension ledger. I drove to the lake house at dawn, the Sonata humming beneath me like an old friend. The road to Pine Hollow wound through pine trees and mist. When I arrived, I opened every window and let the air in. The smell of cedar and thyme. I found his framed photo on the mantel. Mr. Whitaker, smiling with his fishing hat crooked. I spoke aloud to him, voice shaking. Someone's trying, Henry, they're trying. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Over the next few days, I made calls, quiet ones. To the bank manager whose son I'd taught in 2nd grade, to my attorney, who still sent me Christmas cards. To Naomi Bell, a former student I hadn't seen in years, but followed online. She was raising a disabled daughter, Zara. I remembered reading about her struggle to afford transportation to the therapy center across town. I told her, "Come by on Thursday. I have something to give you." That night, I returned to Cedar Ridge for one last thing. My car's title and the folder Brooke had brought. I found it right where she left it, but I added a note on top in neat cursive. Some things cannot be managed. Dignity is one of them. The next morning, I walked into the DMV with Naomi. She looked stunned, tears in her eyes when I signed over the car. "I can't take this, Mrs. Pierce." "Yes, you can," I said. "It's a gift from a teacher who still believes in doing what's right." When I got home, Brooke's car was already in the driveway. She was standing on the porch with a man in a "We Buy Cars" shirt, tapping her phone impatiently. "Where is it?" she barked as I stepped out of Naomi's borrowed sedan. "Gone," I said simply. Her jaw dropped. "You sold it without me." "No, I gave it away." "To who?" "To someone who actually deserves kindness." Her voice rose to a shriek. "You're insane." I smiled, the calm kind that scares people like her. "No, Brooke, I finally learned your language. Action." The color drained from her face. "Aaron will hear about this." "I'm counting on it." She stormed off, heels clacking down the steps, phone already at her ear. I stood there, the sun warm on my shoulders, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one being managed, I was the one teaching a lesson. And this time, I made sure it would be remembered. Aaron slept on my sofa that night, shoes still on, the folder clutched to his chest like a life vest. I covered him with the old quilt my mother pieced from classroom aprons, then sat at the kitchen table and watched the steam rise from the kettle, a small ghost curling and vanishing. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. What I felt was cleaner than triumph and sharper than grief, relief with an edge. Just after 7, my doorbell rang. Brooke. No makeup, hair in a fist, eyes bright and jittery. She pushed past me as if the house still recognized her. "We got off on the wrong foot," she said, pacing. "Let's all calm down. You'll call your private detective or whatever and tell him to delete that nonsense. Aaron and I will reset." "A reset," I repeated, "like unplugging a toaster." "Exactly." She flashed the sales smile. "I'll manage everything. We'll sell the house. Put you in a nice condo with an elevator. Safer. Then we can—" Aaron appeared in the doorway, rumpled and exhausted. "Stop," he said. "It's over." Her eyes went glassy. "Baby, you don't mean that." He held up the page with Dylan's name. "Do not call me baby." I set a small recorder on the table and pressed play. Brooke's voicemail purred into the room. "Her car's clean. I'll handle the old lady." I let it finish. No commentary. I had learned, as a teacher and a widow, that silence can be the most eloquent consequence. Brooke's mouth opened, then closed. "Fine," she snapped, turning to me. "What do you want? Money? An apology? I'll post one on Facebook if it helps your image." "What I want," I said. "You can't give, but you can stop taking." She laughed, but there was no air in it. "You think this makes you noble? Giving a junk car to a charity case and playing detective? Please, Aaron, tell her." Aaron didn't. He took his coat from the chair and pointed to the door. "Go." "Where am I supposed to—" "Anywhere that isn't here." The door closed. The house exhaled. We spent the rest of the morning untangling small traps. I changed the passwords she'd helped me create. We called the bank. The manager flagged my accounts and added a voice code. My first pet's name, the one no one ever guessed. Aaron sat beside me, dialing numbers, apologizing without saying the word, his shame a quiet throb between us. At noon, I made grilled cheese as if we were back to snow days and cartoons. We ate in the living room, plates balanced on our knees. Finally, he said, "What do we do next?" "Not we," I corrected gently. "You call a lawyer. You end your marriage safely. You go to therapy. You pay back the loans you asked for. And you learn the difference between love and convenience." He nodded, eyes wet. "And you?" I went to the bedroom and returned with a large cream envelope. I laid it on his lap. Inside were 3 things: the deed to Mr. Whitaker's lake house in Pine Hollow, a summary of the trust he'd left me years ago, and my new will, signed and witnessed that morning. Aaron leafed through the papers slowly, his mouth parting when he reached the will. "Mom, 30% for you," I said. 70% for the people who stood by me when it cost them time and effort. Naomi, Mrs. Alvarez, Tyler from the library. If you want more than 30, you'll have to earn it the old-fashioned way, by being the kind of man I raised. He bowed his head, a boy again. I will. In the afternoon, I took my folder to the station. The young officer read more carefully when he reached the forgery attempt. "We can't promise a prosecution," he said, "but the bank report and the voicemail are strong." He made copies and thanked me for being clear and calm. Decades in a classroom teach you how to present facts without embroidery. Before I left the precinct, I called the ethics line at the bank where Dylan worked. I did not gossip. I used dates and times. I used my teacher voice, the one that made second graders hand over the slime they swore they didn't have. The compliance woman listened, asked for the file, and said in that clipped way of people trained not to promise anything, "We'll review immediately." I drove to Pine Hollow that evening. The lake was a sheet of pewter under the lowering sky. I unlocked the door, turned on the lamps, and opened the windows. Mr. Whitaker's house always smelled of cedar and old music. On the mantel, beside his photo, I set a copy of my will and the trust summary. Then I brewed tea and watched dusk pull its blue shawl over the water. My phone buzzed. A message from Naomi, a picture of Zara in the passenger seat, pink sunglasses, mouth open in a laugh big enough to swallow the world. 35 minutes door to door, Naomi wrote. "You changed our life in a day." I sent back a heart and then another, because sometimes language needs help. 2 days later, Aaron met me at the lake. He looked thinner in the way grief carves you, but steadier. "She moved out," he said. "I filed the papers, I'm seeing a counselor, and I brought a check." He unfolded it with shaking fingers. $7,300, the sum of every emergency I'd covered. I didn't take it. "Put it in a separate account," I said. "Call it the Making Amends Fund. Use it for people who can't repay you. Every time it drops, add to it." He swallowed. "A tithe of repair?" "Something like that." We walked the shoreline. He told me things I already knew and things I didn't. How Brooke had praised him for being sensible whenever he avoided difficult conversations. How he had confused marriage with permission to look away. I told him the truth without sharpening it. That cowardice arrives politely, in increments. That decency, like exercise, is a muscle. That night, he slept in the guest room under a quilt I'd sewn from Aaron's camp t-shirts. In the morning, he brewed coffee and said, "I told my boss I need time off. I'm helping Naomi this week, driving to therapy, fixing a ramp, whatever she needs." His voice was fragile, but clear, a new instrument trying its first notes. When we returned to Cedar Ridge, a letter waited in my mailbox on thick paper. From the bank. An internal investigation had opened. The loan officer was on leave. They thanked me for the documentation and for bringing the matter to our attention. Tidy words, but effective, I set the letter under a magnet shaped like an apple. That afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez came by with soup. She kissed my forehead and said, "I heard about the car, God bless your stubborn heart." I told her about the trust and the will. She covered her mouth, then shook her head. "Ellen, I can't accept—" "You can," I said. "You already have. Every day you drove me to appointments. Every text, every check-in. Everyone thinks riches are money. I know better." At sunset, the doorbell rang again. Not Brooke. Tyler from the library, cheeks pink, backpack slung like a promise. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, "the kids asked if you'd come read on Thursdays. They miss your voices for the characters." "My voices," I corrected, smiling. "Plural." He grinned. Plural. I looked around my living room, lamp glow, tidy stacks of papers, a son washing dishes without being asked. I felt the strange, simple hush that happens when a storm finally empties itself and the air tastes new. Revenge had never been my music. What I wanted, I realized, was restoration. And the first note of it, clear and steady, was playing in my house. That night, before sleep, I wrote 3 letters. One to Mr. Whitaker, which I tucked behind his photo at Pine Hollow. One to my students, the ones grown and scattered, inviting them to a Saturday reading circle. And one to myself at 42, the year I almost sold my wedding china. You were right to keep the plates, I wrote. There will be dinners to celebrate again. Months passed. Brooke vanished, exposed for fraud by her own paper trail. Aaron filed for annulment, repaid every dollar, and joined a counseling group for adult children learning how to draw boundaries. Naomi's little Zara now reached therapy in 35 minutes, and her laughter echoed through the same streets where I once felt invisible. The Whitaker Trust matched my gift, funding a small community center, reading classes for kids, art therapy for mothers starting over. Every Sunday, Aaron visits. We drink coffee, plant tulips, and talk like 2 people rebuilding a bridge. If this story taught me anything, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that kindness means surrender. Dignity isn't negotiable, and peace is the finest revenge. Have you ever had to fight for your dignity? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to fade quietly. It's never too late to reclaim your power. If my story touched your heart, subscribe for more true stories of women who refuse to be broken, because it's never too late to take back your dignity and begin again.